Perfect. Welcome everybody who's coming in. We're going to give everyone just a minute or two to log in after their lunch, just to make sure everybody has a chance to arrive, and then we'll get started.
Can they actually see us right now?
Yes.
Oh.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
I'm glad I didn't start scratching myself or something.
Start picking.
I know, it's like,
Can I just say, you two are adorable. I'm loving it. I almost wish we were recording all of that beforehand because it's really cute.
Yeah, we've been sharing these headphones on the various video chats we've been doing, and I had somebody say, "Oh my God, you guys look like you're in high school sharing the headphones with an NSYNC CD, on the portable CD player."
Yeah, it's cute. It's super cute.
And then I was in Morgan and Barry's session earlier, and they were in completely opposite rooms of the different floors of the house, floor 1 and floor 4. So it's just funny to see you two cuddled up with your shared earbuds, and then they were in complete opposite.
We had to do an interview for, it was like a New York radio station. And they were like, well, we really want to have 2 different sets of audio. So Erika had to be upstairs, I had to be downstairs. And then there was the sort of East Coast, West Coast lag. So I'd be able to hear Erika talking upstairs as she replied. And then there would be this dead silence moment where I knew I had to reply to something in a few seconds time. It was all very...
there was a leg between us. There was a leg between us and the East Coast. It was not our best interview.
No, it wasn't our best.
No.
I mean, whatever. But I love... It's really important for us to be together and to it's...
That was the point.
Yeah. So the whole point being it feels really nice to actually be next to each other, and then we can look at each other and we can be like, what do you think of that, Erika? And
yeah, and when somebody's saying something they shouldn't, you can just be like, nudge.
Oh, that's great. Well, it's 2:03 and we have about 45 minutes to go through our presentation. So for those who came right on time, let's get started. I just wanted to mention a few things before we dive in. I see everyone's muted now, which is great. You can keep yourself muted until you have a question, and then feel free to unmute yourself and jump in with a question. You can do it through that method, or you can also put it into the chat, and we'll make sure that we relay that question to our authors. And just so you know, we are recording the session for people to view later. If you want to turn on your video, that's totally fine, but it is being recorded, just so you know. And I think that's it. I'm going to jump right in and give a quick introduction to our authors, and then I'm going to let them do a little bit bigger introduction and talk about their own careers, and then we can dive into some more questions. So we have Erika Moen, who's a cartoonist, and Matthew Nolan, who is a designer, editor, and publisher. They both live in Portland, Oregon, with their cat. And in addition to creating comics, Erika regularly teaches classes and guest lectures on different subjects for high schools and colleges all around the country. And we're very happy to have them here today. And so I'll let you guys take it away with a quick introduction of yourselves and your careers.
Yeah, well, I'm Matthew.
Yeah.
Erika.
Yeah.
We've been doing sex education comics for the last 8 or so years.
Yeah.
And just recently,
officially 8 years, but anyway.
Yeah, we've been a working duo couple. And just recently we created and released Let's Talk About It, a sex education and communication sort of guide for teens. Yeah, we think comics are the best, and that's our wheelhouse.
Yeah, I guess going way back, I've been doing comics on the internet since I was about 15 years old, and I am 37 now. So that's over.
It's like half your life.
I think it's like 2/3 of my life. Wait, no, I'm not good at math. This is why I do comics.
It's a whole lot of life.
It's a whole lot of life.
Yeah.
And I just got started drawing silly little comics that jokes with my friends, ridiculous things that happen to us, and just drawn as nothing special, scanning it in and posting it on these forums that I used to be a member of. And people started following them and paying attention. And just like I didn't mean to become a professional cartoonist. It just like one step led to another step, led to another step. And you know, 20 years later,
and then boom, cartoonist.
Then you're a professional cartoonist at some point along the way.
Yeah, I sort of married in, like I was doing video game stuff, and then as your stuff was picking up, I was every so often I'd be leaning over your shoulder and I'd be like, oh, how about you do this? How about you try that? Oh, this is really interesting. And then our whole community of friends and people that we know here are all cartoonists. Yeah. And so I sort of became ingrained in cartooning through, it started to be everything, you know, living and breathing cartooning. And then before I knew it, when you know, I got let go for something and like some of the work dried up and I was like, oh, okay, you know, and Erika's stuff was picking up. I was like, well, I'll step up. I'll do some writing. I'll do some of the design, some of the layout stuff. And then before I knew it, it was my full-time gig as well. Yeah. And we would properly meshed our processes.
I remember like you were gonna like step up and run the comics business, because I used to do pretty much all, like 90% of the comics business and creation was on my shoulders. And then you stepped up and were like, okay, well, I'll do this until I get another job.
Right. I'll do this for the minute. Yeah.
I'll do this for the minute. And then, you know, I'll find another stable form of employment. And then like,
there was a while too, where I was doing like 2 jobs too.
Yeah.
Where I was
there was
doing
some
that
overlap.
as well as all the freelance gigs I was still picking up.
Yeah.
So,
but then just like at a certain point, you were like, oh, this comics job is the one that is the most like, is being the most stable and secure. It's because you could devote your time to it, and I could devote my time to just drawing. And 8 years later,
we're still doing it.
We're still doing it.
That's our introduction. Hi.
Awesome. Well, I had a question. You know, you mentioned that you do books, and you've done your most recent book, which is all about sex education, and you know, you also have another book, sort of tells a little bit, you know, story of your life and sort of and what you do, what you've been doing. And I'm wondering, you know, what is the hardest part about putting sort of your innermost feelings, you know, especially when you're talking about, you know, sex education, your own life, you know, your own biography, like what's the hardest part about putting that first on paper, but then out to the world for everybody to see?
Gosh, there's a lot there. I think the hardest part might be trying to determine what is shareable and what isn't shareable. Like with comics, with the kind of comics that we like to do, we like to try to keep things positive, fun, and friendly. And there's, you know, we enjoy putting in a good gag or making people laugh. And so trying to find those sort of gems of comedy and those human moments in even hard topics, that's quite the hard part. And then determining which things would make for a good comic and which things are maybe like oversharing or don't quite connect in the comic form. There's sort of a lot of thinking that goes into that. We'll have moments in our life where we'll be like, oh, wow, that's wonderful. That would make a really wonderful comic. And then we give it some more thought, and it's like, it doesn't quite translate, or it doesn't quite land. It doesn't, you know, the comic process wouldn't treat it well, and so it kind of gets put off the side, or you have to edit something a little bit.
Yeah,
I don't know, that feels like a murky answer, but it's translating things into comics. Some things don't survive, and so it's all trying to find the right way to do that. That's probably the most difficult part.
And trying to cater, because like we can have a personal experience that our group of friends will understand. Like something ridiculous happens, and it's like, oh, if I make a comic, our friend group and our peer group will understand the context for that, and they'll get the joke. But people outside of our immediate friend circle might read that and be like, I don't understand this, or that seems like a really weird way to respond to something. And the humor and the humanness won't translate outside of people who are in our sphere. So there's the point of view of like, oh, this is a good, funny comic. It was constructed fine, but will outside audiences understand it? Will they appreciate it? Will they like it? Will they not like it? And so then there's that self-censorship of trying to make sure that you tailor your work so that the biggest number of people possible will get the message that you're trying to communicate.
But it makes those moments where when you've made a comic, or when you find that when you've made a comic that really does communicate with a large board of people, or a lot of people go, oh, I love that one thing that you put in there. It makes those really rewarding, because then you know you've really hit that mark really well.
Spot.
Yeah.
So it's a delicate balance.
Especially for new people who are new to it, is feeling like, well, I have to be authentic, like this is a biography, everything has to be exactly as it happened, but realizing that there's that gray area and that nuance where you get to be the creator and you get to add that little bit of, fiction to it. Even though it's true to life, you're still putting it through that different lens for other people.
Yeah, like doing autobiographical work is not a strict documentation of every single thing that happened exactly in that order by the minute that it happened, because you're taking real life events and then you are telling a story. And in the service of telling a story, you need to edit.
Yeah, it's like a film documentary, right? Like they still have that editorial process where they decide which clips to put and which order. And you're doing the same thing with autobiocomics.
And which bits to leave out, because in the service of the story. Or like there's this book called Blankets by Craig Thompson. And it's the story of Craig Thompson. It's autobiographical, memoirish. And the comic says him and his one brother went through this experience together, when in reality, he actually has a sister and he just like did not include her in the story because it split the attention of the story too much, and it was too distracting to the main point that he was trying to make. So in the service of the story, he's like, my one brother.
And like comics really allow you to sort of explore abstractions too. So one of the things that we do all the time is sex education. And with that stuff, you kind of have to, it's all fair to talk about humans and stories. But at some point, you've got to start talking about the technical stuff, or you've got to explain something. And so you can sort of leave the moment-to-moment paneling and comicking and then explore something abstract, like showing a body piece or a piece of anatomy, and then kind of developing and explaining onto that. So it's one of the strengths of comics is being able to explore these things that you might not be able to explore linearly in a documentary or a piece of writing.
Yeah, I found that, and I read Let's Talk About It, and I loved how you were able to just dive deep into something and really explore the anatomy and really do it in a visual way, and I did enjoy that part.
No, thank you.
One of the reasons why I really wanted to do sex education through comics is because when I was learning about sex stuff as a teenager, and mind you, I was on the early days of internet. So internet was not what it is today. And I could not imagine what a lot of these things I was being told about. I couldn't picture what they looked like. I couldn't comprehend. And I needed visuals. I needed things that I could look at and be like, oh, that when somebody says this happens, that's what it looks like. And so doing comics, I could show people like, this is what that looks like. When you ovulate, the egg is popping out here and it's going through this system. And I like just lots of different things like that.
I wish I had that book. Like as a teenager, man, it would have been a totally different experience.
Same, honestly. I mean, we were making the book that we needed as
we were
teens.
younger.
Yeah, like this book, it is for today's teens, but also like mentally, emotionally, we've made it for little Matt and Erika to send it back in time and be like, here you go.
Here's our guide. Yeah.
Here's the starter. Yes.
Yeah. I was gonna say I did have another question that popped up. So, and this kind of speaks a little bit to what we're talking about, connecting to yourself and telling your own story. But a lot of the drawings that I saw, especially in your DAR, do you call it DAR or is it DAR? DAR. Okay. in your DAR comics, they really seem to capture your essence. I saw photos of you, and then I saw the cartoon, and it really seemed to capture your essence. And I'm wondering if you could, oh, you're welcome, how you could talk about that process of like how you captured that and uncovered yourself in illustration form.
I don't want to talk for you.
Could you please? Because I don't know.
So it's interesting because I don't think you were really putting that kind of level of thought into it.
Yeah,
I think
it wasn't a conscious I shall capture my essence.
The DAR work was very explorative.
Yes.
And you used yourself as the vehicle through which to sort of expand and grow and develop into comics. Mm-hmm. So it was, it was kind of selfish and self-serving in that you were the star, but it was the easiest way for you to explore comics, especially small, tiny little vignettes of life. That some of them, just made perfect little comics and perfect little biters, tasters. I mean, for context, you were doing like one a week for years and years and years and years. Mm-hmm. Some of them are hit and miss, but they were all little slices of life. And because it shows your life as you were living it, it was showing who you were too. But I don't think it was never with the purpose or full intent to be like, you were going to show Erika. It was always just.
Well, I mean, actually, let me disagree a little bit.
Okay.
I disagree. I guess I did want to be seen. I wanted to feel like I mattered in a way, because growing up, I just always felt like I am a speck in the cosmos and I do not matter. And I like, by writing down the events that were happening and then drawing cartoons to go with them, it was sort of like saying this moment mattered. This interaction that I was in mattered. My thoughts that I had in that moment mattered. Therefore, for one moment, I mattered. And I'm thinking about like how I was learning to cartoon. And
see, I see it so explorative.
It was really explorative too.
It also gave you a vehicle by which to sort of meet more cartoonists and get their inputs and see how their processes went. And
yeah, I was trying a lot of different things, especially in the first couple of years of DAR, because if you go back and look at them, some of them are just like one big panel. Some of them are like 6 pages long with very different layouts. And I was just trying a lot of stuff to see like what conveys the message I'm trying to convey. And then as time went on, I found that for the kind of stories I wanted to tell, like this 6-panel format was the one that
you connected to the most.
Yeah, and I found I could convey basically any story in 6 beats. And just learning how to draw, I mean, my biggest artistic influence would be Batman the Animated Series. So I was always trying to emulate this really, I mean, it doesn't show in the beginning, but I was trying to draw with the fewest possible lines and the simplest possible lines to create the figures that I wanted to create and to show a lot of like action in each drawing. I didn't just want like a static, stiff illustration that's like super seriously rendered, like a good artistic piece. I wanted a cartoon that's expressive and fluid and energetic. And then also I spent a lot of time like referencing myself. And how do I stand?
I mean, you were a theater kid. Right?
I was a theater kid.
Yeah. And that sort of translated into comics too. Oh, yeah. And wanting to do autobio, like you wanted to be the
I wanted to be the star.
You wanted to be in the spotlight.
Yeah. Well, and going back to theater, it actually had a huge impact on my comics, because that's where I learned about like how do you stage yourself on the stage and set it up. And I took what I had learned in theater about how the layout is of the stage, and I translated that also into comics, and like how, because on stage, people normally when you're talking to somebody, you are facing them
Right.
straight on like this.
Right.
But on stage, that's really
it's
boring.
Like 3/4
so
view.
you do 3/4 view and you talk with your face like this, and you're like, blah, 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 blah. And it looks totally natural to the audience, but nobody talks like that in real life. It's not natural in real life. Right. But like I use that in comics, everybody's at 3/4, not profile.
It's funny, for me, it's always been movies. Like anytime I think about paneling or putting something together, I think about the camera being 2 or 3 people behind all these cameras, sort of like, giving me hand signs or showing little things behind the camera. And I always think of the characters as sort of actors in front of that, and how the camera is moving or panning. And so whenever I do editorial, because I work with a lot of other artists beyond just Erika.
Guest cartoonists.
A lot of the editorial I'll give will be like in camera language, as if it's all real.
Well, and also another thing that I learned from theater was like, you can't just walk onto a stage and then recite your lines. Your body has to be performing just as much as your face is. Because like if you're having a really sad scene and your face is all sad, but you're just standing normal, something's not right. You have to use your entire body to act. And that also is true in comics. The characters that I draw, like if somebody is feeling insecure and unsure, like I'll have the shoulders stooped, I'll have the spine curved, their legs might be bent a little bit. If somebody's feeling super duper confident, shoulders go back, chest is out, legs are at like a strong little stance. So the physical acting that goes into theater also translates very much into drawing your little characters in their scenes as well. So yeah, I guess going back to the question of capturing essence, I also like I spent a lot of time looking at my face, but like making faces and trying to learn how to draw the facial expressions that I was making. And that's
I remember who's the guy who did Ace Ventura?
Jim Carrey.
I remember an interview where he was talking a lot about, because he's very well known for his faces, and he was like, I spent all this time as a kid just in the mirror practicing my face. Erika works at a comic studio that has lots of comic artists in it. They all rent the space and they share lots of cool equipment. Like you go in there and almost all the time there's somebody making a weird face or weird pose in front of their computer or screen.
People they'll be working and then they'll stop and they'll lean back and they'll be like, and then they'll go back, and it's because they're trying to feel, what does that pose feel like so that they can draw it.
That's a little bit off topic, but there's a lot that goes into it.
Well, that's great, that theater connection, and to take yourself off the paper and to actually move into the 3D world and experiment with yourself, there and observing yourself. I like that a lot. So it's not that you had this sort of magic self-awareness. It sounds like, from, what we were saying is that you kind of developed that with it being an experiment and over time and working through that.
And it's a lot about the medium that you have at that moment when you're young. Like you see so many kids doing the same sorts of things that you were doing with comics, but now they're doing with like TikToks or other things like that. Like they're being just as creative, just as expressive, and they're sharing slices of their life and exploring what it means to be human and online. But for you at the time, that was comics.
Yeah. No, I've got people that will ask, like, why did you do autobio? Why did you make these comics and put them on the internet? And I guess it's a little bit of an outdated answer now, but it's like, well, you know how with Twitter, when Twitter started back in the day, it was just to be like, hey, I had a sandwich, click send. Hey, here was a funny exchange I had with a friend, click send. And that's what comics were to me, was like, oh, little thing happened, draw, click send.
Yeah, and if you want to go all the way back, there was one big forum back in the day where all these artists and really talented kids would turn up and talk about art, and they sort of made their own little areas on this big forum, and the one that you slotted into was comics.
Yeah. I mean, and the people that I met on that forum then, they're like the superstars of young adult graphic novels today, and in animation as well. Like people who worked on Frozen, people who have the biggest graphic novels that teens are reading today. Like they were
wonderful
all
to
on that
see.
forum.
It's wonderful to see so many people have survived that career path, right?
Yeah.
That point from when they were kids and they got inspired and interested in comics, and then they
and we
followed
were fueling
through.
each other.
Yeah.
It was like a perpetual motion machine, because it was like, oh my God, this girl draws really well. I want to be her friend. I'll draw a picture for her. And then she drew a picture for me. And then we met at San Diego Comic-Con. And then we worked on a comic together. And then she got invited to be part of an anthology. And she was like, hey, what about my friend Erika?
Mm-hmm.
And then that anthology led to another thing, led to and we were all boosting each other. We were all cheering each other on. And now we have like New York Times bestseller lists, graphic novelists, and no big deal.
It still trickles down. It still trickles through now. Like the editors that we had, the team that came on board with this, most of them are people that we've known through the industry. And
like over a decade.
And it's we've had conversations and had meals before we ever thought about working together.
Before that was an option. Like before that was a sparkle in the eye.
Yeah.
It was.
How do you get into comics?
Make friends.
Community. Right?
Yeah.
Like
honestly,
that was it.
That was actually one of the next questions that had come up was, how did you get your community of artist friends? And you spoke about that a little bit. You just sort of made friends and helped each other and kept working. Do you know of any websites or forums that exist now that potential artists might go to?
We're probably the wrong people to ask, because
I don't know anymore.
Yeah, because I think
too old.
I think too that my analogy to TikTok is probably pretty spot on in the sense that we don't really know anymore. We're not young. We're not trying to find those spaces, and we're not really engaging in them. Right? We've moved into different things, or
geriatric phase.
Yeah, we're not online so much. We focus on the friends we have nearby now. But
I've done as much as I can to like remove myself from being online and from being accessible, because like I don't have the spoons anymore. Is that phrase?
I've never heard that.
Oh, really?
I've never.
Spoons?
Okay, nobody knows what I'm talking about.
No.
Okay, spoons is like, from what I understand, I'm probably gonna mangle it, but that is like a unit of energy that you have within you, and you only have so many spoons in you, and you use them to socialize, you use them to get your work done, and when you use up those spoons, you don't have any left, and it's like, I'm sorry, I don't have another spoon to socialize, do this other social event.
Do you know why it's a spoon?
I feel like I've heard that now that you explained it. I feel like I have heard that.
I know, like in mental health and disability discourse, it's really common. So I just assumed everybody sees it, because like I follow a lot of that stuff. But if you look up like I don't have the spoons, look that up on Google, you'll get the essay that explains it.
But the animation, my spoon is too big.
Yes, I do. I
have a big spoon.
My spoon is too big. Sorry.
I was going to say that, like, if you're looking to crack into one of these fields, there's no one set guaranteed. You have to be on this forum. You have to be doing this in the right place. Just create. If comics is the thing that you're really interested in, put it out into the different platforms and the places. If you're really into Batman the animated series, be a part of the little groups where that still exists, and share what you have. Try to exist online in a positive way, and don't engage on the negative stuff, and then just put what you have out there and see what comes of it.
I guess
you'll find your communities in the things that you're interested in, right? You go out there and you find the thing that you're really passionate about, spend some time playing in that sandbox, and if you get uninterested after a while, that's okay too. There's no winning or losing here. But if you happen to get really into it and you happen to make a career path out of it, that's great too,
the whole making your thing, just starting and make your thing and put it out there, and chances are people who have a similar interest, who enjoy a similar aesthetic that you do, if they see it and they connect with it, they might reach out to you. And so that's a way to start building your community. And likewise, when you find art and creations that you connect to, send a little thing to the person and be like, hey, I really liked this. And if it's an account that has 1 million followers, like, I'm sure they will appreciate the message, but they probably won't have the spoons to reply and engage. Sure. But if it's to somebody who has an account that the profile says they're about your same age and they have about as many followers as you have, like, reach out to them. And the chances of connecting with them are a lot higher because they don't have, as the 1 million follower account don't have that sheer volume of people being like, pay attention to me. And so you can build community by doing your own reaching out to people who share common interests as you, who are making things that catch your attention, that are similar to what you're making.
Just starting is the right way to go. And, try not to put too much stress and expectations on your shoulders. Don't expect to go out there and be like, I'm starting my comics career. It's just do what you feel passionate and excited about, and
in the moment,
and that the other stuff will follow.
Like, explore a lot of different interests. Like I said, I started out as a theater kid, and stuff I learned in theater I have brought over into comics. And there's other people who started out as super comics people, and then they moved over into animation, and the stuff they learned in comics they apply to animation. And just study a lot of different. Study is a hard word, but
be kind to yourself. Explore the things that you're passionate about.
Try lots of different things. You'll be surprised at what little bits you will connect with and you can take forward into other things.
As someone just posted in the chat, the link to the spoon theory. So
okay, there we go.
it's out there. Yes.
I still want to know why it's spoons. Why it's not like batteries or something.
Maybe you should click that link.
You can learn about the history of it. Now I'm thinking about the editing process. And I know let's talk about it. The book. And thinking about the editing process and, what that's like, because, you work so hard on that. You mentioned that it was sort of maybe like a letter to yourself as a younger teen. And what is it like to put that out there? And obviously it covers topics too that, some people might not want, all this information out there for teens. And so how do you balance the editing process?
Well, gosh.
Well, we started and just like, let's put it all out there. Let's just cover the information exactly as we wanted to. And we thought that our editors, Gina Gagliano and Whitney,
our amazing team at Random House Graphic.
Anyway, we thought they'd be like, okay, guys, cool first draft, time to pull it back. Like, you can't show that. You can't talk about that. Let's reel it in. Let's use a euphemism. And they did not. They were like, yeah, okay.
But I think it stems to like what we really set out to do, which was like when we first were writing this book, it was like, well, I wanted to do a book that was going to be the second book that a teen might read after they've had their sex education at school. They've learned how Babby is made, that they would still have questions. And so it was really a matter of sitting down and being like, what are those questions and how can we get to them as quickly as possible? And so the overall arcing theme was like answering these questions and just telling kids that they're okay for feeling the things that they feel. And so we took all of that, and then we started forming these little chapters to answer these very specific, questions. And then we had this sort of big list of chapters that got, added to by the team or removed a little bit, and things got moved around. And then we just built from there. The editing afterwards was mostly just to do with sort of phonetics or how writing is written, but like we
trimming down our paragraphs of text, being like, guys, this is too much text. And we're like, but we need all those words.
I need every word.
I need all of those words.
Yeah. And then too many Britishisms. That was one of the biggest things.
Oh, that's right.
Because I'll write lots and lots of sort of slang stuff, and then a lot of it was like,
chuffed.
You're chuffed, hunky dory or something like that. It's like people.
That's American.
I can't think of anything.
Throwing a spanner in the works.
Yeah, so it would always be like, "What are you writing here, Matt?" And I'm like, I don't know. So
yeah, I was impressed by the topics it covered. And I was like, I love that this was published, because I was kind of shocked at some of it. And I was just like, wow, this is great that, it was published, and that someone didn't, censor you down. They actually let you put what you wanted out there.
Yeah, Random House have treated us exceptionally well.
Yeah,
if you're going to get published, I recommend Random House. They've been really lovely to us.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and they understood the project from the get-go.
Yeah, they believed in it. Yeah,
they get it. They got it.
Yeah, I feel like it's something that the world definitely needs, and to have it, a lot of us here today are librarians, and to have this in the library where a kid can just check it out and, take it home and explore the different things that they need to know. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
I was just going to peek a look at our questions. We had some popping in. You did talk a little bit about it being inspired by some of like the Batman comics. Were there any other inspirational people or artists that you guys looked up to?
So I managed to sneak into comics through you and being married into that. But for you, the sort of instigating things, I can let you talk, but I can really tell.
I want to know what you're going to say.
Okay, Ellen Forney's work.
Ellen Forney, yeah.
Animated Batman series. Alison Bechdel, and oh gosh, there's that book it has a really weird. It's Bean World.
I only discovered that in my 20s.
Oh,
that was not an introduction.
I take it back.
Bean World by Larry Marder.
Yeah, it's weird. A really weird abstract story that's
like beans
wonderful.
You eat.
Yeah, except they've got little legs and they're running around and
they live in this sort of weird abstract.
Like, it's a wonderful example of the unique way comics can visually tell stories that you don't. Kids, go check out Bean World by Larry Marder, published by Dark Horse Comics. It's a really good lesson in using comics and the simplest lines and shapes possible to communicate so much, and really creative layouts for like spatially what comics can do that cannot be done through film, through prose, through just regular illustration.
That and the world building is very different. Most stories now they're sort of slightly based in reality. This is so outside of reality, and it's so world built as well that these little beings live in some weird abstraction of existence, where the only thing that we have in relation to it is that it's written in English and the descriptions are in English. And that's our only. I really liked it.
It's great. It had no influence on me as a child because I hadn't read it yet.
All right, Bone. For me at least.
Oh yeah.
Bone.
Bone was really
big time
important.
Bone.
Gosh, I thought of another one, but I've forgotten it. Castle Waiting.
Yep, I was just thinking about that one.
That's it. That's all I got.
Yeah.
What else is there?
Well, those were the big published ones. And then again, like my friends and peers that I made as a teenager, and we were just doing webcomics and mini comics. So not published stuff, but Dylan McConis and Vera Brosgol, Jen Wang, Bill Mudrin, Jen Manley Lee, who does Dicebox, Christopher Baldwin, who did Bruno.
God, the list it's long. And
those people had a huge impact on how I entered comics.
Yeah. But like, if you're looking for a guide, be inspired by whoever and whatever inspires you. You don't have to go to Erika and mine's lists, right? Like, just feel inspired by something, and if comics and art is what you want to explore, draw some art, of it.
And now I'm thinking a little bit about, sort of the physical drawing aspect. What do you guys have for like a setup for creating the comics?
So it changes depending on the project. With Let's Talk About It, we had an assistant helping us out with layouts because Maria France, as things were so busy and we were so time constrained. But generally week to week, because we still do a weekly webcomic on Oh Joy Sex Toy. It starts with one of us attacking a subject, writing it down after doing some research and getting some thoughts, and then passing it to the other one
in a text document.
And that most people won't be able to read it properly. It's filled with all kinds of I don't know, in-house notes. And then the other one takes it to the chop shop, changes it up,
edits it.
Yeah, and if we've got time, then it'll go back again. But normally we don't, and so it's time to move on.
And at this point, it's still just text.
Just text. Yeah.
And mind you, like, it's not even, I mean, occasionally it'll be like, panel 1, person looks surprised.
Right.
Panel 2, they bend over. But for the most part, it's not, we don't even have stage directions. It's just like, here is the information and here's some dialogue that people can say, but there's not a lot of stage directions.
Right. The stage directions sort of come at the next bit, which is the layouts, which is taking all that text, putting it into a blank page document, and then moving it around or chopping that text into word balloons and being like, well, there should be a pause after this bit. So I'm going to have a panel where there's a pause or the action happens, because comics, you have to show action in stages. So you then set it up, and that's normally what you do. Okay. You do the layout.
So text is 50-50 between us, basically. Then when it comes to the drawing, that's my domain. And I get our text document and I read through it, and I have a blank page in Photoshop that I start taking the text and I drop it in until I've been doing this long enough that I just have a sense of how much text goes on the page and how much blank space is needed for the art to fill in around it. So then I start moving around, and as I'm reading the text, I'm trying to think, like, how can this concept be portrayed? And if it's people having a conversation, what body language am I using? If it's something that explaining like how a body function works, I'm thinking about like, okay, what kind of diagram can I do? And how can I make this diagram interesting and engaging? And if we're talking about a concept, like, what is sexual desire? How do I illustrate sexual desire? What does that look like? And it's like, well, a cake. I'm going to make it a cake. So I'm thinking of visual metaphors and how to communicate this stuff that we're writing, so it's visually interesting as well.
And sometimes we'll have conversations about that, or it'll go through a bit of an iterative process where it'll bounce back and it'll be like, oh, this isn't really working, or we need to expand on something, or let's chop that bit out. There might be a bit more iterative, but once that's done, you take these sort of layouts, which Erika's used, sort of very sketchy people, very rough, right? Very just rough. To lay things out. Once that's done, you'll take it, you'll start doing pencils, which is like cleaned up versions of those little characters. They're still not perfect. And then after pencils, you do inks, which are like the nice, clean, perfect lines.
That's like the final lines.
Then it comes back to me. I'll do flats, which is like filling in the colors and then picking out the colors. And then I'll do
what does that mean?
Well, so flatting is you just dump color down wherever, but it's not
color
planned.
blocks.
Like the paint bucket tool.
Yeah, it's the paint bucket tool just to fill up the space.
Fill shape up.
Fill shape up.
Fill shape up.
Fill shape up.
Then you have to get those colors right. So you have to go grab the correct colors for things, or find a nice equilibrium between colors, because there's a lot of thought that can go into colors about balancing out a page. You don't want everything to be neon color, for example. It's got to be nice and neutral and balanced. So I'll do all that, and then I'll take the final assets and I'll move them around a little bit. I like to call it pixel pushing, because you're just pushing by pixels here and there a little bit to get a nice flow across the page. Word ballooning is really important, and how you move from one place to another is equally important. So all that stuff goes through these little edits.
Yeah, and then that's
it.
Well, then you flatten the files and you get them ready for the internet.
Make it ready for the internet or publishing. It's, and then you start again because it's Monday.
Yeah, and then you're on to page 2.
Well, that actually works out to perfect timing. It's 2:45, but I did want to give anybody else, who maybe had a question that popped up in their mind, as we were all talking, if they wanted to throw in one last one, and let them have a chance. But as I let CFC people want to think about that, it's just great, really nice chat, and hearing about what it was like for you guys to become artists and what you guys do in your process. It was really wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
So it was glad.
Wonderful questions.
Yeah. So again, the last call for any questions that popped out. I know because we're recording, sometimes people don't want to jump on, but thank you guys so much. This was wonderful. And we have our committee chair popping in here to to say final goodbye.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you to our volunteers for moderating and getting our questions together. And thank you to Erika and Matthew. It was great to hear your story together and your process, your creative process. I really appreciate everyone attending today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you to everybody who checked in. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.